What if the last words your father ever heard were a threat from your own brother? That's not a movie script. That's real life. And for Tracy Reiner, the horror didn't end with her parents' murder. It began again, just days later, when she heard his voice. Nick's voice, coming from a place no one expected. A wall. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. A wall that wasn't supposed to talk. Tracy Reiner, daughter of the late Rob Reiner and actress-director Michelle Singer, had returned to the Brentwood estate to pick up personal items. It had been days since her younger sister Romy found their parents' bodies in that now-haunted mansion, and Tracy was trying to be brave, trying to feel anything but hollow. She walked slowly through the master bedroom. Her mother's perfume still clung to the drapes. Her father's sweater rested, folded neatly, at the foot of the bed. But it was something behind the wall that pulled her attention. Not a sound at first, a sensation, a faint vibration, a sort of humming that didn't match the silence of the room. Almost like a heartbeat trapped behind drywall. She pressed her ear to the wall, and then she heard it. Static, a click, a voice, and her own blood ran cold. Why was Rob Reiner, Hollywood director, comedy legend, and family man, hiding a recording device in his own bedroom wall? And more terrifying, who was he recording? The answer came seconds later. It was Nick, her brother. And what he said wasn't just angry. It was a threat, a declaration. If you don't stop interfering, Nick growled on the tape, I'll make sure you disappear like you never existed. No music, no dramatic pause, just the dull thud of a door slamming. And Rob's voice, trembling, Nick, don't do this. Now, we could pretend this is just another Hollywood tragedy. Another rich family with secrets. Another sad ending. But this story, this one is different. Because Tracy didn't turn off the tape. She didn't walk away. She pressed rewind. And what she found changed everything. Let's rewind with her. Because the truth about the Reiner murders isn't just hidden in the guest house. It isn't just buried in the Brentwood garden or sealed in a courtroom document. It was always there, inside the walls. And now, it's finally being heard. Let's start with what we thought we knew. Rob Reiner, 78. Acclaimed director. Political activist. Beloved by Hollywood and progressives alike. His wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, 70, a talented filmmaker in her own right. Together, they raised a family many envied, Tracy, Romy, and Nick. The Brentwood estate was a $13.5 million fortress of fame, filled with vintage film reels, awards, laughter, and apparently secrets. On a quiet Sunday night, police were called to the home after a frantic 911 call from Romy, the youngest daughter. They're not breathing. They're not breathing, she reportedly screamed to the dispatcher. By the time LAPD arrived, it was already too late. Rob and Michelle were found stabbed to death in their bedroom. The door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry, but there was blood. On the carpet, on the walls, and, chillingly, leading down the hall toward the guest house, where Nick Reiner lived. He didn't flee. He didn't hide. According to reports, he answered the door in his pajamas, calm. And when detectives asked where he had been, he simply said, sleeping. But was he? Within hours, he was arrested, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And just like that, the Hollywood fairy tale shattered. News vans swarmed Brentwood. Pundits speculated endlessly. Friends issued shocked statements. But something was off. Why would a son murder his own parents? What was the motive? Inheritance? Rage? Mental illness? Theories exploded across the internet. True crime forums lit up. Some pointed to Nick's past, his struggles with addiction, his failed screenwriting ventures, his infamous resentment toward his father's towering success. But no one expected what came next. Because 4 days after the murders, Tracy Reiner made a discovery that would blow the entire investigation wide open. She wasn't looking for anything. She had returned to the house for closure, whatever that meant. Maybe to gather some of her mother's keepsakes. Maybe to feel the presence of her father one last time. Instead, she found evidence. Behind a wooden panel in the master bedroom wall, the one with the black and white photo of Michelle smiling at Rob, there was a small, rectangular cavity, lined with wires, and tucked inside, barely visible to the eye, a recording device. Old school, analog. It had been running, and what it captured was no accident. Rob intended to record this, and he intended it to survive him. Tracy played the tape on an old reel-to-reel machine she found in Rob's office. The moment she heard Nick's voice, her stomach dropped. He wasn't crying. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't even angry in the way you'd expect. He was strategic, calculated, accusatory. He told Rob that the surveillance had to stop. He warned him to stay out of the guest house. He called him a paranoid old man with too much time and too little talent. And then, the sentence Tracy would never forget. If you don't stop interfering, I'll make sure you disappear like you never existed. Chills ran down her spine, because Nick had said something similar years ago, in anger, at a family dinner. But this was different. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't family banter. This was premeditation. And now, it was recorded. But that wasn't even the scariest part. Because when Tracy handed the tape to detectives, their faces changed. One officer stepped out of the room. Another started taking notes. And the lead investigator said, "This tape may not just help us understand what happened. It might explain why it had to happen. Because the tape hinted at something more. A secret Rob was protecting. Something he had uncovered. Something he was willing to die to keep hidden. And Nick? He needed to shut it down. Now here's where things get strange. Stranger than a hidden wall recorder. Stranger than a son allegedly murdering his famous parents." According to Tracy, Rob had been behaving nervous in the months before his death. He double-locked doors. He wrote notes in code. He even asked her once, "If something happens to me, will you keep the house safe?" She thought he meant the art, or maybe the scripts. Now she wasn't so sure. Was Rob Reiner, the same man who directed A Few Good Men, The Princess Bride, and Stand By Me, caught in his own real-life thriller? Had he discovered something, or someone, that made him a target? Was this truly about Nick's rage? Or was Nick just a piece on a larger, more terrifying chessboard? And if Rob was willing to record Nick, his own son, what else was he recording? What had he heard that scared him into silence? And more importantly, what had Nick found out? We are just beginning to scratch the surface. Because what Tracy Reiner uncovered behind a bedroom wall is only the first layer. Behind it is a tangle of family secrets, Hollywood betrayals, and a murder that may have been years, not days, in the making. The media painted this as a domestic tragedy. But the truth? It's something much darker. And Tracy is about to peel back every wall, one by one. Because there are more tapes. And one of them, the last one Rob ever made, is still missing. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the last thing your mother ever did was lock the bedroom door to protect herself from her own son? It was quiet that night. Too quiet. Not a neighbor stirred. No cries for help. No sound of struggle. Just the rhythmic chirp of sprinklers and the distant hum of Los Angeles street lamps humming over Brentwood's polished sidewalks. But inside the $13.5 million Reiner estate, time was running out. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the Reiner home security system logged an internal override. A command input from a manual control pad in the main hallway. Not unusual, unless you knew what came next. Because at 11:48 p.m., the master bedroom door locked from the inside. And by 12:07 a.m., Rob and Michelle Reiner were dead. Let's back up. What really happened in those final hours? According to official reports, the last time anyone heard from Rob or Michelle was earlier that evening, around 9:30 p.m. They'd just returned home from a private dinner at a friend's house in Bel Air. They looked happy, relaxed. Nothing seemed off. Tracy later confirmed the dinner was part of a low-key anniversary celebration, not of their wedding, but of their first film collaboration. A quiet milestone. No fanfare, just love and memories. And yet, within 3 hours, both would be gone. The Reiners' daughter Romy, 27, said she'd been texting with her mom just after 10:15 p.m. Michelle sent a laughing emoji in response to a meme about bad celebrity biopics. "I had no clue it'd be the last time she'd ever text me," Romy said, tears welling in her eyes during a private interview days later. But something happened between that 10:15 p.m. exchange and the moment Romy arrived at the house at 12:21 a.m. Something horrifying. Romy wasn't supposed to come by that night. She'd been out with friends in West Hollywood and decided, on a whim, to stop by and grab a camera lens she'd left in the home office. A quick detour. 20 minutes, tops. But as she pulled into the driveway, she noticed something strange. The front gate was open, and the garden lights, normally triggered on a timer, were all turned off. The house was dark. Too dark. Even stranger, the guest house lights were still on. Romy figured Nick was up late again. He often was. But something about the atmosphere made her uneasy. Like the air was thicker, heavier. She texted her mom. No reply. She called. Straight to voicemail. That's when the panic set in. Romy pushed open the front door, unlocked. The house smelled like lavender and something else. Metallic. She walked in. Called out, Mom? Dad? Nothing. Then, the faintest creak from upstairs. She ran toward the sound. Up the staircase. Down the hallway. The master bedroom door was closed. Locked. She pounded on it. MOM. No answer. She grabbed the house phone from the hallway and dialed 911. Now picture the 911 call that would trigger national headlines. 911. What's your emergency? It's my parents. They won't answer. The door's locked. They're not answering. Are you inside the home now? Yes. Please. Please send someone. They're not breathing. I think. Oh my God, there's blood on the floor. Romy's voice broke on the word blood. When LAPD officers arrived, they found her sitting at the bottom of the stairs, shaking, phone clutched in her hand like it was life support. They forced open the bedroom door with a crowbar. And what they found inside was a scene no daughter should ever witness. Rob was slumped against the far wall, just beside the closet. His shirt was soaked in red. Michelle lay on the bed, partially covered by a blanket, her hand reaching out, as if she'd tried to grab something. Or someone. Both showed signs of multiple stab wounds. No defensive injuries. No signs of struggle. But a strange detail caught one officer's eye. Both were barefoot. And a set of slippers sat neatly by the bed, untouched. As if they'd never had a chance to run. On the floor, beside Rob, a notebook. Empty. No note. No explanation. But in the margin, scribbled in faint ink, 2 words. He knew. Investigators swarmed the property within the hour. Detectives, forensics, digital analysts. But all eyes quickly turned to the guest house. Nick's guest house. The door was shut. The lights were on. And according to the digital log, the door hadn't opened since 11:45 p.m., just minutes before the bedroom door was locked. Officers knocked. No answer. They knocked again. Finally, the door opened. And there stood Nick Reiner. Hair tousled. Pajama bottoms. A calm expression. Is everything okay? He asked. Not the question you'd expect from someone whose parents had just been murdered 100 feet away. Here's where things took a sharp turn. When officers asked Nick what he'd been doing, he said, writing. Then I fell asleep. They asked if he'd heard anything. No. My AC is loud. But when they checked his phone, it had no activity between 11:10 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. Odd. And when they searched the guest house, no blood, no clothes out of place. But Nick's shoes, all of them, were missing. Every pair. Not in the closet. Not by the door. Not under the bed. Gone. As if someone had carefully removed them or never worn them back in. More unsettling? The shower floor was dry. Nick hadn't cleaned up. So, where were the shoes? And how had he stayed so clean? That was the question the lead detective asked. And the one Nick couldn't answer. But it wasn't just the physical clues that raised eyebrows. It was his tone. His effect. Police reports described Nick as emotionally flat, vague, and intellectually evasive. He didn't cry. He didn't ask how they died. He didn't even ask to see Romy. When one detective mentioned the bedroom was a difficult scene, Nick reportedly replied, they were old. They didn't suffer, right? That single line would later echo in courtrooms and media headlines. And in Tracy's memory, hauntingly, when she played back that audio tape from behind the wall, because the same voice that said they didn't suffer was the one that had said, I'll make sure you disappear like you never existed. By 4 a.m., Nick was taken into custody, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And just like that, the Reiner legacy twisted into a real-life nightmare. The world gasped. Nick Reiner, the quiet one, the troubled one, had always walked a fragile line between redemption and relapse, between Hollywood sun and hidden shadow. Now, he was a suspect in the double homicide of his own parents. But Tracy? She wasn't ready to accept that the story ended there. Because while Nick sat in a holding cell, she returned to the house, and something drew her back to the master bedroom. Not for closure, not for comfort, but for something else. A hum, a whisper, a secret trapped behind drywall, waiting to be heard. But what she found behind that panel wasn't the only thing left behind. Because in the shadows of the Reiner house, another voice had been recorded. And this one wasn't Nick's. What if the person everyone called the quiet one was never quiet at all, just patient? Nick Reiner had always lived in the margins of the family photograph. He stood half a step back, smiled late, spoke less. While Rob commanded rooms and Michelle filled them with warmth, Nick drifted. Present, but never anchored. The son of a legend, growing up in the shadow of a voice that boomed, a laugh that filled studios, a career that defined eras. And yet, people said Nick was gentle, sensitive, thoughtful. But here's the contradiction that refuses to go away. Every person who knew Nick well describes two different men. The Nick who showed up to family dinners with wine and a half smile. And the Nick who, when challenged, hardened, jaw tight, eyes cold, words chosen like knives. Which one walked out of the guest house that night? Let's rewind further back. Because you don't wake up one morning and become a suspect in your parents' murders. You arrive there, step by step. Nick was born into privilege, yes, but also into pressure. Rob Reiner was already a towering presence in Hollywood. Every room had expectations baked into it. Every introduction came with a qualifier. This is Rob's son. As a child, Nick adored his father. Friends remember him following Rob around sets, mimicking camera moves with toy blocks, repeating lines under his breath. He wanted to make movies. He wanted to be seen. But admiration can curdle into resentment when approval never comes. By his late teens, the gap widened. Nick's early scripts were rejected, not by studios, but by Rob. Not ready, he'd say. Not there yet. According to family friends, Rob believed in tough love. According to Nick, it felt like sabotage. Here's the thing nobody talks about enough. Rejection hurts more when it comes from home. Nick bounced between colleges, then between cities. He tried acting, tried writing, tried producing. None of it stuck. Meanwhile, Rob's career kept soaring. Awards, applause, influence. The kind of influence that can open doors or close them. Nick once confided to a friend. He says he wants me to succeed, but only if it's on his terms. Is that bitterness or something else? By his mid-20s, Nick's struggles were no longer quiet. Rehab stints followed. Friends noticed mood swings, long silences, then bursts of intensity. Emails sent at 3 a.m. accusing people of betrayal, then apologies the next day. Tracy noticed it first. She's older, protective, the one who tried to mediate. She'd invite Nick to lunch, ask him gently how he was doing, remind him that Rob loved him, even if he didn't always show it well. Nick would nod, smile, say he was fine. But the tension didn't dissipate. It calcified. By 29, Nick moved into the guest house at the Brentwood estate. On paper, it was practical, close to family, quiet, a place to regroup. But inside the house, whispers began. Michelle worried the arrangement blurred boundaries. Rob insisted it was temporary. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent. And permanent arrangements breed permanent conflicts. Because living steps away from your parents isn't the same as being close to them. It can feel like surveillance, judgment, a daily reminder of everything you haven't become. Nick's friends noticed he began talking about interference. He used the word often. Rob interfering with his finances. Rob interfering with his relationships. Rob interfering with his future. Interfering. Does that word sound familiar? It's the same word Nick used on the tape Tracy found behind the wall. If you don't stop interfering, the repetition matters. Language leaves fingerprints. In the months leading up to the murders, the relationship between father and son deteriorated sharply. Arguments escalated from passive to explosive. According to one family acquaintance, Nick accused Rob of monitoring him, tracking his spending, reading his messages. At first, people assumed it was paranoia, stress, residual effects of addiction. But then small details started lining up. Rob changed passwords, installed new security cameras, asked the house manager to log every entry and exit, including the guest house. Why would he do that? Because Rob wasn't just worried about Nick's sobriety. He was afraid of him. Let that sink in. A father afraid of his own son. Tracy remembers a phone call 3 weeks before the murders. Rob's voice was quieter than usual. Careful. I think he's hiding something, Rob said. And I don't mean drugs. Nick, meanwhile, felt cornered. Trapped. Friends say he believed Rob was collecting evidence against him, financial, personal, legal. That Rob planned to cut him out of the will. That Michelle supported the plan. Whether those beliefs were true or not almost doesn't matter. Because to Nick, they felt real. And perceived threats can provoke very real responses. Here's another contradiction. Nick could be charming. In interviews, in casual encounters, he was polite, soft-spoken, thoughtful. He talked about art, about healing, about finding peace. But behind closed doors, the tone shifted. One former girlfriend described Nick as emotionally intense. Another used a stronger word, controlling. She said he'd accuse her of plotting against him if she missed a call. He'd oscillate between affection and withdrawal. Again, two Nicks. Which one sat across from Rob during that recorded conversation? Let's talk about motive. Because prosecutors love clean narratives. Money, rage, mental illness. They want a single line that explains everything. But this case refuses to be simple. Nick wasn't broke. He received a monthly stipend. He lived rent-free. His parents covered medical expenses. If this were about money, why not wait? Unless money wasn't the real currency here. Unless it was control. Rob Reiner was known for keeping meticulous records. Notes, journals, drafts. He believed in documentation, in memory, in evidence. What if Rob had discovered something about Nick that went beyond family drama? Something Nick couldn't afford to let surface? The tape suggests Rob was interfering with something specific, something active, ongoing. And Nick's response wasn't denial. It was a threat. I'll make sure you disappear like you never existed. Those aren't words you choose casually. They're words you choose when you believe erasure is possible. And maybe, in Nick's mind, it was. There's another detail that complicates the picture. Nick had been researching surveillance technology. Small devices, hidden mics, countermeasures. Friends say he was obsessed with privacy, that he believed he was being watched. But what if he was? What if Rob really had been recording him, not out of malice, but out of fear? And what if Nick found out? The guest house search uncovered something unsettling, a notebook filled with sketches, floor plans, angles, sightlines, not violent drawings, but architectural ones. The house, the guest house, the main bedroom. When asked about it, Nick said he was thinking about renovations. Renovations? Or escape routes? Or something else entirely? Let's not forget the missing shoes. Every pair gone. Not just one. Not just the ones by the door. All of them. Why does that matter? Because it suggests planning, intent, the desire to avoid tracking, to move silently, to leave no trace. This isn't the behavior of someone in a sudden rage. It's the behavior of someone who thought ahead. But here's the twist that keeps investigators up at night. Nick had opportunity. He had access. He had motive. But did he act alone? Because the security system was accessed from inside the main house, not the guest house. And the deleted footage? It required a higher-level clearance. Rob's clearance. Unless someone else had it. Unless someone else knew the codes. Unless someone else was moving pieces while Nick was being watched. Tracy began asking questions that made people uncomfortable. Why did Rob start recording in the first place? Why did Michelle keep a diary that vanished? Why did Nick talk about interference as if it were a coordinated operation? And why, in the recording, does Rob say, "You're not the only one I recorded"? That line changes everything, because it suggests Nick wasn't the sole focus. And if Nick wasn't the only one under scrutiny, who else was Rob afraid of? As Tracy dug deeper into her brother's past, one thing became painfully clear. Nick Reiner wasn't just a troubled son. He was a man who believed the walls were closing in. And when people feel cornered, they don't always run. Sometimes they strike. But before we decide who Nick really is, victim, villain, or something in between, there's a voice we haven't heard enough from. The sister who made the 911 call. The one who warned police that a dangerous family member should be a suspect. Romy Reiner. And what she told investigators changes the timeline in ways no one expected. Because Romy knew something long before that night. Something she tried to ignore. And something that may explain why the house went silent when it did. But what she revealed next would pull the investigation into even darker territory. One where fear wasn't imagined and danger wasn't theoretical. It was already inside the family. What if your father left you one last message, but it wasn't meant for you? Tracy Reiner wasn't looking for anything when she went back to the house. Not the truth. Not evidence. Not even closure. She just wanted to feel the air again. The way it used to be before everything fractured. Before her brother was arrested. Before her mother's laugh and her father's voice became echoes frozen in news headlines and police reports. She wanted to walk the halls in silence. Touch the backs of chairs. Breathe in the scent of the books in Rob's study. Maybe grab the old family albums from the den. But the house had changed. And it wasn't just grief. It was something else. Like the walls themselves had been holding their breath. And when Tracy stepped into the master bedroom, something let go. The sun had just started to set, casting long shadows across the room. The kind that move like secrets. The kind that whisper. Tracy didn't know what made her stop beside the framed photograph on the wall. It was one she'd walked past hundreds of times. Her mother, laughing, looking over her shoulder as Rob reached to kiss her cheek. But this time, she noticed something odd. The frame was slightly tilted. No big deal, right? But the Reiner house was known for its perfection. Rob had always been meticulous. A director even at home, Michelle used to joke. Nothing was ever out of place. And that frame? It was covering something. A faint line. Like a panel. The edge of a concealed compartment. Tracy felt a pull in her chest. Her fingers moved before her brain gave permission. She lifted the photo from the wall. Behind it, a thin seam revealed itself. Like a scar. Like a secret begging to be known. There was no lock. Just a small notch. She pulled. Click. The panel gave way with a soft snap, revealing a narrow cavity, about 2 feet wide, 10 inches tall. Inside, wires. Dust. A small analog recording device. It was old. Vintage. Maybe late 90s. But clearly functional. And still on. Tracy froze. Her heartbeat began to spike. Why would Rob have hidden a recording device in his own bedroom wall? And more terrifying, who had it been recording? Her mind raced. Could it have captured the night of the murders? Was this some kind of home security backup? Or was it something far more deliberate? She didn't call the police. Not yet. She didn't even call Romy. Instead, she slid the device out and carried it, gingerly, reverently, like a relic, to her father's study. She remembered the reel-to-reel player Rob had kept in a glass case behind his desk. He used it to transfer old recordings, songs, interviews, even screenwriting sessions. Tracy loaded the tape and pressed play. What came next wasn't just sound. It was a ghost. Rob's voice. Calm, measured, nervous. Then Nick's voice. And the calm evaporated. The audio was scratchy but clear enough to understand. Nick's tone was cold, accusatory, almost rehearsed. I told you to stop digging. Rob responded gently. I'm not digging, Nick. I'm protecting. From what? From you. A beat of silence. Then Nick's voice again. Darker. Tighter. If you don't stop interfering, I'll make sure you disappear like you never existed. Another pause. And then Rob's voice, trembling but defiant. You're not the only one I recorded. Click. A door slams. The tape ends. And Tracy sits there, stunned. Frozen. The room feels colder. She rewinds the tape. Plays it again. Listens to every inflection. Every breath. It's unmistakable. This wasn't a vague family argument. It was a threat. And a warning. Her hands were shaking as she pressed stop. She stared at the machine, trying to process what she had just heard. This wasn't just emotional. This was evidence. Her brother had threatened their father. Not months ago. Not years ago. But recently. Tracy didn't know the exact date of the recording. There was no timestamp. But based on the content, it had to be close. Maybe days before the murders. And now it was in her hands. But that wasn't what made her sick to her stomach. It was what Rob said just before the end. You're not the only one I recorded. That meant there were others. Other conversations. Other secrets. Other tapes. Hidden where? She ran back upstairs. Searched the rest of the bedroom. Checked behind every photo. Tapped the walls. Nothing. She moved to Rob's study. His office. The guest bathroom. The linen closet. Still nothing. But in the dining room, behind a cabinet, she found a second panel. This one thinner, narrower. Inside, another recorder. But this one had a different label. Michelle/January 4th. Tracy's breath caught in her throat. She pressed play. Her mother's voice filled the room. She was speaking to someone, but not Rob. Not Nick. A woman. Possibly Romy. They were whispering. He's getting worse, Michelle said. Do you think he knows? The other voice asked. He knows Rob's recording him. That's why he's been digging around. What if he finds the bedroom mic? Then we're all in danger. The tape cuts. Tracy collapses into a chair. Her mother knew. Her mother feared. And that fear wasn't random. It was focused on Nick. This changed everything. The narrative the world had seen was incomplete. A disturbed son lashes out. But now it seemed more calculated. This wasn't spontaneous violence. This was a chain reaction. Nick felt surveilled, targeted. But why? What had Rob discovered that pushed him to start recording his own family? And why did Michelle go along with it? Tracy looked at the tape again. Michelle's label. Her handwriting. The way the J in Jan curled just like in her recipe cards. This wasn't just a grieving daughter's imagination. This was real. And it begged the question, were there more recordings? Tracy expanded the search. Over the next several hours, she found 2 more devices. One in the coat closet near the foyer. Another in the upstairs hallway vent. Both labeled. Both filled with voices. Some were mundane. Family dinners. Arguments about film. But one recording shook her to the core. It captured a conversation between Rob and Michelle. Late at night. Rob, if something happens to us. Michelle, don't say that. Rob, no. If it does, Tracy has to find the bedroom wall. She'll know what to do. That wasn't just a warning. That was a directive. Her father left her a map, and Tracy had just begun to follow it. But one piece was still missing. The night of the murders. None of the tapes she'd found so far captured that moment. Nothing had the timestamp. Nothing captured Nick's movements, or anyone else's. It was as if that night had been erased, or never recorded at all. Unless that final tape, the one her father hinted at, was still out there. Still hidden. Still waiting. And whoever finds it, may be the only one who knows the full truth. But what Tracy found next, deep in the guest house where Nick lived, wasn't just another tape. It was something much darker. And it raised one terrifying question. What if Rob Reiner wasn't recording to protect himself, but to protect someone else? What if the tape that could destroy everything wasn't hidden in the house, but in someone's heart? There are recordings you make for memory, for nostalgia, a child's laughter, an old song, a moment you never want to lose. And then, there are recordings you make in case you don't make it. This was one of the latter. But this one wasn't meant to be found, and definitely not meant to be heard. Especially by Tracy. Especially by us. And yet it was. Because when Tracy crossed the courtyard into the guest house days after discovering the recording behind the master bedroom wall, she wasn't looking for another tape. She was looking for shoes. The ones that had gone missing the night Rob and Michelle were murdered. The ones that police never recovered. She had a theory. If Nick had returned to the guest house that night after, whatever happened, he would have gotten rid of anything with blood on it. Clothes. Footprints. His phone data may have been wiped, but shoes? Shoes leave behind more than rubber prints. They carry silence. And silence always has a source. So she searched. Under the bed. Behind the closet drawers. Inside a storage trunk Nick used to keep old scripts. And that's where she found it. But not shoes. A cassette. Wrapped in a hand towel. Tucked between yellowed printouts of a screenplay Nick had written at 24. A dark psychological drama that had never seen the light of day. Tracy recognized the handwriting immediately. Her father's. Just 3 words written in marker. Do not listen. Let that sink in. This wasn't a note of fear. Or even secrecy. It was a command. A plea. A warning. And she ignored it. Because by then, it was too late to obey. Too late to pretend she didn't already know too much. She took the tape back to the main house. Slid it into the real player. Pressed play. And instantly regretted it. Because what she heard wasn't just a conversation. It was a confession. The audio begins with silence. Then breathing. Heavy. Nervous. Rob's voice enters, low and cautious. You can't threaten me in my own house, Nick. Nick, I'm not threatening you. I'm warning you. Rob, there's a difference. Nick, one gives you a chance. Rob's sigh fills the room. The way a man exhales when he realizes the person in front of him isn't bluffing. Rob, you're angry. Nick, you made me angry. You monitored me. Spied on me. Rob, because you were lying. Nick, so were you. That line lands like a brick. Because this wasn't about a one-sided betrayal. This was mutual. A father recording his son. And a son who knew. Nick continues. You want to protect Romy and Tracy from me, but you can't even protect yourself. Rob, that's why I have this. A clicking sound. maybe gesturing to the recorder itself. Nick, you think anyone's going to believe you over me? You know what they call you behind closed doors, right? Rob, what? Nick, the controlling father, the egomaniac, the director who couldn't direct his own family. A long pause. Then Rob says, almost gently, "You're not well, Nick." That's not an insult. That's an observation. Nick, you know what's funny? Rob, what? Nick, you think you're the only one with tapes. That silence. It's the kind that makes your bones hurt. Because now the power balance shifts. Rob is no longer the observer. He's being watched too. Rob, what do you mean? Nick, check under your bed sometime. I left you a gift. Another pause. Then footsteps. And just as the audio seems to fade, Rob speaks again. His voice now urgent. Desperate. Nick, don't walk out of here with this in your head. Nick, why not? Rob, because you don't just ruin your enemies with secrets. You ruin yourself. Nick, if you don't stop interfering, I'll make sure you disappear like you never existed. Click. Door slams. End of tape. But this version wasn't edited. Unlike the first tape, this one had the entire lead up. It showed how long Rob had been trying to reach him, how far Nick had already slipped, and it showed something even scarier. Nick wasn't just paranoid. He was prepared. He knew about the recordings. He suspected there were more, and he had created some of his own. Which raised a chilling question. Where were Nick's tapes? And what was on those? Tracy sat alone in the study, the room spinning around her. Her father had tried to protect them, tried to hold on to a son slipping away, tried to draw a line between family and fear. But it hadn't worked, because Nick had been playing the same game, and possibly playing it better. If Nick had audio of Rob, Michelle, or anyone else in the house, it could change the entire narrative. Suddenly, motive wasn't just about money or anger. It was about blackmail, about leverage, about truth as a weapon. Tracy remembered something Michelle had once told her, just offhand, after one of Nick's darker mood swings. Your brother collects silence like other people collect coins. She never understood what it meant. Now she did. Nick didn't just want to be free of judgment. He wanted control of the narrative, of the voices in the house, of the very memory of who the Reiners were. And he wasn't above deleting people to make that happen. Later that day, Tracy did what she dreaded most. She handed the tape to investigators. They listened in stunned silence. One detective reportedly muttered, "This changes the timeline." Another made a copy on the spot and locked it in evidence. But then came the chilling twist. The tech analyst pulled Tracy aside and said, "There's a problem." "What kind of problem?" she asked. "This wasn't the only tape. It's labeled Tape 3. Which means there are at least two more recordings, possibly capturing the final pieces of the puzzle, the motive, the plan, the execution, and neither of them had been found. Not in the house, not in the guest house, not in any of the security backups. Gone, or worse, taken, which begs the most important question of all. Who took the tapes, and what were they trying to hide? Because if Nick didn't take them, and if Rob didn't destroy them, that means someone else was in that house, and they may have walked away with the key to the entire case. But what Tracy would uncover next didn't just point to missing tapes. It pointed to a diary, one written by Michelle in the final weeks of her life. A diary no one had seen, but that someone had read. And what Michelle wrote in it may explain why she died first, and why Rob followed. What if every room in your home had been listening, and one day, it started talking back? By now, Tracy Reiner had accepted something horrifying. Her childhood home hadn't just been a house. It had been a surveillance web. And her father, the man known for crafting heartwarming stories on screen, had quietly turned their home into a vault of whispered truths. But what Rob recorded wasn't nearly as shocking as what he didn't. Because some rooms stayed silent. Some walls refused to speak. And now, Tracy was left chasing echoes that might never come back. Unless she could find the other recordings. The ones referenced on that chilling cassette marked Tape 3. It started with a hunch. Rob had said it himself on the tape. "You're not the only one I recorded." So if Nick was one subject, who were the others? Michelle? Romy? Someone else? That question clawed at Tracy. She couldn't sleep, could barely eat. Her dreams were filled with static and muffled voices, slamming doors, bloodstains that refused to dry. So, she did what Rob would have done. She started documenting, mapping. She created a crude floor plan of the entire estate from memory, every hallway, every door, every corner where a microphone could hide. And then she went back, room by room. The dining room. She found the first one behind a wooden panel under the antique buffet table. Another analog recorder. Inside, a tape labeled Dinner/January 10th. She slid it into the reel-to-reel. Pressed play. The audio was faint, cutlery clinking, glasses being raised, Michelle talking about a charity gala. But then came something odd. A conversation between Romy and Michelle, nearly drowned out by background noise. Romy, do you think he's reading your diary? Michelle, I don't know. I've started hiding it better. Romy, what if he finds it? Michelle, then he finds the truth. A pause. Romy, that could get dangerous. The tape clicks off. Tracy stared into the spinning reels. Her mother had been keeping a diary. That much was clear. And she'd hidden it. Why? What truth was she recording that couldn't be said out loud? And why was Romy, sweet, artistic Romy, so concerned about danger? Back upstairs, in Michelle's old art studio, Tracy found a vent partially unscrewed. Inside, another recorder, and a small velvet pouch with tiny cassette tapes. Most were labeled with initials and dates. MR/January 11th, RR/December 27th, NR/Dec 31, 12:15 a.m. But one stood out. Unlabeled. No date. No markings. Just a tape. Raw. Tracy's stomach dropped as she picked it up. Something about it felt wrong. She took it to the player. Pressed play. Static. Then whispering. Not a conversation. A confession. Her mother's voice. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. He's watching us, every move. Rob thinks the taping will protect us. I'm not so sure anymore. Another whisper. Tracy couldn't identify it. Possibly Romy again. We have to find a way out of this. Before it's too late. Michelle, if you're listening to this, and we're already gone, find the diary. It has everything. Pause. But be careful who you show it to. Click. End of tape. Tracy sat in stunned silence. Her heart racing. Because now this wasn't just about what happened. It was about why. Michelle wasn't afraid of Rob. She wasn't afraid of Nick, at least not entirely. She was afraid of being watched, which made the next discovery even more terrifying. In the hallway near the guest rooms, Tracy opened a closet where Rob used to keep his coats. She found another recorder tucked into the false bottom of an umbrella stand. It was labeled RR/Jan 12 to 2 a.m. That was the night before the murders. She played it. Rob's voice, shaky, panicked. She's gone. Michelle's gone. She left the room after we argued about the tapes. I told her Nick was onto us. She said she didn't care, that the truth had to come out. Breathing, pacing, footsteps. If anything happens to us, I want Tracy to have it all. The recordings, the letters, the diary. Whispered, especially the diary. It's in the fireplace. The old one in the reading room. She stuffed it in the panel behind the wood stack. Tracy stood up mid-play. The reading room. She bolted down the hallway. Slipped into the room. Pulled the logs from the stack. And there it was. Behind a warped wooden slat. Wrapped in a weathered cashmere scarf. Her mother's diary. She held it like it was a living thing. The leather cover cracked at the edges. Pages yellowed. She opened it slowly. The entries began in October of the previous year. They started innocently enough. Recipes, errands, reminders to buy more paint for Romy. But then, the tone shifted. Mid-November, an entry read. Rob told me he found something in Nick's emails. He won't say what yet, just that it changes everything. He asked if I had noticed anything missing from the safe. December. Nick's moods are darker. He accused me of siding with Rob. I told him I just want peace. He said, then stay out of it. I don't feel safe. January 2nd. Rob set up another mic. This one in the hallway outside Nick's room. I'm scared. What if Nick finds it? What if Romy's right? What if this backfires? January 11th. I think Nick knows. He's been watching us closely. Yesterday he asked what I write in my journal. I lied. I said I was planning a surprise party. And finally, January 12th, her last entry. If anything happens to us, please believe we try to fix it. We tried to love him, to save him. But the house is full of ghosts now. And some of them were the faces of people we once knew. Tracy broke down. She clutched the diary to her chest and sobbed until her voice gave out. Because this wasn't just a record of fear. It was a final goodbye. But one sentence stayed lodged in her mind. Some ghosts were the faces of people we once knew. Did Michelle mean Nick? Or someone else? Could there be a second suspect? Someone who'd been feeding Nick's paranoia? Pushing him? Manipulating him? Tracy took the diary to the authorities. But that night, alone in her apartment, something clicked. She remembered something else from the master bedroom. A security panel that had been tampered with. Rob had set up multiple systems, but only one allowed access to all the mics. And only he had the code. Unless someone had watched him enter it. Someone who lived close. Someone who had time. Someone who wanted selective silence. Because when Tracy looked at the list of the recordings found, one room was conspicuously absent. The guest house. It had no devices, no tapes, no entries in the diary, no mentions at all. And the silence now screamed louder than anything she'd heard. What if the real crime wasn't just murder? What if it was erasure? A deliberate effort to wipe out the truth from the one room that mattered most? Because someone had tampered with the recordings. Someone had deleted the evidence from that night. And Tracy now believed it may not have been Nick at all. But what she found next, hidden in the vents of the guest house bathroom, would challenge everything she thought she knew. Because it wasn't a tape. It was a photo. And it didn't show Nick holding the knife. It showed someone else. Someone no one had even questioned. What if the person trying to protect you had been warning you all along, and you just never listened? Romy Reiner was the youngest. The artist. The soft one. The quiet one. She had always kept her distance from the drama of the Reiner family orbit. Not aloof, not uninvolved, but observant. A silent witness to the rising tensions between her parents and her older brother, Nick. But silence, as we've now learned, was a weapon in that house. And Romy? She had been holding on to something for months. A secret she'd tried to bury under jokes and late-night sketching sessions. A truth she'd almost convinced herself didn't matter. Until blood stained the bedroom carpet. And then everything she'd tried to forget came flooding back. Because Romy had warned someone. And that someone was the police. Let's rewind to the night of the murders. While the world focused on Romy's panicked 911 call, her tearful voice, her horrified scream when officers pried open the bedroom door, few people noticed the next thing she said to police. It was quiet, almost swallowed in the chaos. But it was recorded. Check the guest house. He's dangerous. 4 words. He is dangerous. Words that suggest knowledge, not speculation, not surprise. And yet, in the hours following that moment, Romy seemed to retract. She stopped talking, lawyered up, moved in with a family friend, grieved in private. To most of the world, it looked like trauma. But to detectives, it looked like fear. Tracy had always protected Romy, not just as the older sister, but as the buffer, the one who cleaned up after Nick's outbursts, the one who helped Romy through her anxiety attacks, the one who reassured her when Nick's moods grew dark. So when Tracy showed her mother's diary to Romy, expecting tears, Romy didn't cry. She just nodded. I know, she whispered. You knew about the diary? Tracy asked. Romy nodded again. I helped her hide it. Those 5 words slammed into Tracy like a train. Romy had been part of it, not just watching from the sidelines. She was inside the circle of fear. Romy finally opened up. She told Tracy about the night 2 weeks before the murders. She was staying at the house, crashing in one of the guest rooms. Around 2 a.m., she woke up to the sound of voices, heated, muffled. She crept into the hallway. Rob and Nick were arguing near the staircase. She heard only fragments. No right to record me. You've gone too far. You don't know what I've seen. Then silence. Then Rob said something Romy never forgot. You'll destroy us all, Nick. The next morning, the family pretended nothing had happened. But that night, Romy asked Michelle about it. Her mother's response? She handed her a small leather-bound book. The diary. If anything happens, she said, make sure Tracy gets this. That moment had been haunting Romy ever since. She never told anyone. Not the police. Not Tracy. Until now. And now, it was too late. Or was it? Romy also revealed something even more chilling. About the guest house. She had been in there, once, late at night, while Nick was away. She went in to drop off some soup, Michelle's idea, a peace offering. While she waited for Nick, she wandered. And in his office drawer, she saw something strange. A USB stick labeled RR_full. At the time, she didn't think much of it. But now, she wondered if it meant Rob Reiner, full tapes. Had Nick copied his father's recordings? Did he have them all? If so, What did he plan to do with them? Tracy froze. This changed everything. If Nick had full access to the tapes, even before the murders, then he wasn't just reacting to surveillance. He was strategizing. Which begged the question, how did he get the recordings? Rob's security setup was password protected. The access codes were stored in a locked drawer. Only 2 people had the combination, Rob and Michelle, unless. Romy hesitated. There's something else, she said. Tracy leaned in. Romy's eyes were glassy now. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I think he knew the code. What do you mean? Tracy asked. Nick. He saw Mom open the drawer once. He watched her. He's always been good at that, pretending not to look while he memorized everything. It was exactly the kind of detail that police had missed, that investigators had brushed off. But to Tracy, it was confirmation. Nick had the code. Nick had the tapes. Nick had motive. But here's the twist. Romy didn't think he acted alone. There's someone else, she said. Tracy's breath caught. Who? Romy looked away. I don't know. He was on the phone all the time. Whispering. Using that burner phone. Tracy blinked. Burner phone? Yes, Romy said. He had it for months. Said it was for script meetings, but he never let anyone see it. And it wasn't synced to the Wi-Fi. That single detail sent Tracy's mind racing. A burner phone meant untraceable calls. Encrypted texts. A second life. Could Nick have been working with someone? Feeding them recordings? Getting advice? Or worse, taking orders? Romy shivered. There was one night, she added. I heard him say something. Just one sentence. What did he say? Romy's voice cracked. He said, they're almost done recording. After that, we clean it up. Clean it up. A phrase that doesn't sound like redemption. It sounds like erasure. Suddenly, Tracy remembered something else. The missing tapes. 2 unaccounted for. The night of the murder. And the night before. What if Nick didn't destroy them? What if he gave them to someone? And what if that someone was still out there? Romy leaned in one last time. There's something I never told anyone. I don't know if it means anything. What is it? That night, after I called 911, before the police arrived, I saw someone. Tracy's blood ran cold. Who? I don't know. A man. At the back gate. Just for a second. He ran. Did you tell the police? Romy shook her head. I didn't trust them. And I wasn't sure what I saw. I thought I was imagining it. She looked up, tears falling now. But I don't think I imagined it anymore. Tracy held her. Because now, the puzzle had changed shape. Nick may have committed the murders. Or maybe someone made sure he would. And now, that someone was missing. Vanished. Like the tapes. But not for long. Because what Tracy would find next, buried in the basement storage of the Reiner estate, would bring that missing man back into focus. A blueprint. A payment log. And a surveillance photo. Of a face she'd never seen before. But one she would never forget. What if the most powerful voice in a murder case belonged to someone already dead? For weeks, detectives and media outlets alike had been chasing suspects, surveillance footage, blood trails, and digital forensics. Everyone was asking, what did Nick do? But very few asked the more haunting question, what did Michelle know? Because buried in the chaos of the investigation was the whisper of a woman who had seen the unraveling from the inside. And she hadn't just watched it happen. She wrote it down. In a diary she tried to keep hidden. A diary that mysteriously vanished after her death. And what it contained could tear everything apart. The moment Tracy and Romy realized the diary was missing, a sick dread began to bloom in Tracy's gut. She had found the tapes, the vents, the recorders in the walls. She had traced Michelle's voice across whispers and fear. But the one thing that could tie it all together, the diary her mother clutched like a lifeline, was gone. Not just misplaced, erased. And that meant only one thing. Someone had come back for it. And they knew exactly where to look. The timeline didn't lie. The diary had been there. Romy had seen it just a few days before the murders, wrapped in a yellow scarf, hidden behind the reading room fireplace panel. Tracy had even touched the panel herself after the murders, before police taped off the area. But when she checked again, empty. No scarf. No book. No trace. Which raised a terrifying possibility. The killer hadn't just silenced Rob and Michelle. They'd come back afterward to silence the truth they left behind. This wasn't panic. It was cleanup. But then came a break. Not from the police. From a contractor. The Reiners had been undergoing minor renovations the month before the murders. Nothing major, Just storage reorganization and some insulation updates in the basement. One of the contractors, a man named Hector, had come by a few times to finish the work. Tracy remembered him. Quiet, respectful, always carried a notebook. So when she returned to the estate with new eyes, looking for anything that might connect Michelle's diary to someone outside the family, she thought of Hector. She tracked him down, and when she asked if he'd seen anything unusual, he paused, then opened his notebook. Inside were rough sketches of the basement layout and notes about hidden cavity behind wine rack, per Mr. Michelle Reiner. Tracy's heart leapt. She flipped to the page. There, dated 2 weeks before the murders. Client request, discreet storage space inside false panel. To be accessible only by lifting left wine crate. Emphasis on privacy. Contents equals sensitive. No documentation required. She stared at those words until they blurred. Michelle had hidden something else. Not in the reading room. In the basement. Tracy returned to the house. She made her way to the old wine cellar, deep beneath the west wing of the estate. It was cooler than she remembered, still stocked with bottles, many of them untouched for decades. She scanned the labels. Nothing stood out, until she saw it. A single wooden crate that didn't match the rest. Unlabeled, dustless, and slightly lifted at one edge. She knelt down, fingers trembling, lifted the crate, and beneath it, a small wooden hatch. She pulled. Inside was a narrow compartment, maybe 8 inches deep. And there, wrapped in the same yellow scarf Romy remembered, was the diary. Tracy clutched it to her chest, holding back tears. Her mother's voice. Her last trace of agency. Her last attempt to warn the world. Still here. Still waiting. She opened it slowly. This wasn't the same one she'd found earlier. That was a decoy. A partial. This was the complete record. And it began over 6 months before the murders. Michelle's handwriting was steady at first. Precise. Reflective. The entries started with reflections on family. Rob's stubbornness. Nick's isolation. Tracy's strength. Romy's sensitivity. But as the weeks passed, her tone shifted. June 5th. Rob told me about a file he found. Nick had been using a second laptop. He wouldn't say what was on it, but he looked rattled. He said, "Our son's been planning something." July 13th. Nick confronted Rob about the recordings. Rob tried to deny it, but Nick laughed. Said, "You really think I don't know which walls have ears? I'm scared." He's too calm. August 1st. Tracy asked if we were okay. I lied. Said we were just tired. But I see it in her eyes. She knows something's wrong. August 21st. Rob played me a tape tonight. Nick threatening him. Not overtly, but with that undertone. Said, "One day you'll look back and wonder how you missed the signs." But I haven't missed them. I see them every day. September 5th. Nick asked me, point blank, if I trust Rob. I said yes. He smirked and said, "Then maybe you should ask what else he's hiding." I can't tell if he's bluffing or broken. September 29th. I heard Nick on the phone. He was speaking in codes. Said something about deliverables and neutralizing the source. I tried to record him, but he noticed the mic was moved. Rob says we need to stay ahead. But how do you stay ahead of your own child? October 3rd. I don't know who to be afraid of anymore. That line hit Tracy like a blow to the chest. But it was the final entries that turned dread into devastation. October 15th. Rob says we should begin locking our bedroom door. I agreed. October 20th. Nick tried to enter our room last night. Said he heard us talking. Said we were conspiring. I didn't sleep. October 25th. The tapes are almost complete. Rob says once he's finished, he'll give them to Tracy. He thinks she can figure it out if anything happens. I'm not so sure. I don't want her to carry this burden. November 1st. I've seen the darkness now. I've seen it in his eyes. I've seen it in the way he watches the cameras. I've seen it in the way he no longer says mom. Final entry, November 4th. If you are reading this, and we're gone, I need you to understand. Nick wasn't born this way. He was made this way. And someone helped him. Someone we let too close. The name is in the envelope. Don't trust anyone until you've read it. There was no envelope. At least not in the compartment. But Tracy remembered the old mail drawer in the study. She bolted upstairs, flung it open, and there, beneath the clutter of unopened bills and faded postcards, an envelope. Her mother's handwriting. Just one word on the front. Tracy. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single piece of paper. One name. one address, and a line. He visited Nick the week before it happened. I didn't tell Rob. The name? Tracy's jaw dropped. Because it wasn't a stranger. It was someone Rob trusted. A family friend. A colleague. Someone who had access. Someone who knew the codes. Someone who